Question: how did you come to Krishna consciousness? Answer: I have not yet come to Krishna consciousness. I am trying to come. I have come to the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, and in the Association of Devotees in the Society, I hope to one day come to Krishna consciousness. So what I will tell is how I came to the Society of Devotees who are aspiring for Krishna consciousness. I was born and brought up in a Hindu family wherein I knew about Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, but they were not very relevant to my way of thinking. Since my childhood, my ambitions were primarily intellectual. Now, I wanted to study and learn and contribute thereby to society. So, three different currents all contributed in a decisive way to bring me to Krishna. So, one was personal achievement, second was social contribution, and third was social transformation. I look at all of these. Personal achievement. My dream since my childhood was to be a topper, to be the top in my academic performance, to be the unique number one. Although I was always among the top students, but I was never the unique number one in the important exams in my life. So eventually, when I came to my engineering, and then in 1996 I gave my GRE, the graduate record examination, which many Indians give for going to America for higher education. So English had always been my favorite, and I used to love studying English words and memorizing their meanings and just browsing through dictionaries for long hours. So I was quite good at English, and I did very well in GRE. At that time, GRE was out of 2400, I got 2350. So I was not just the topper in my college, but in fact, I was the topper in the entire state of Maharashtra. And I was not just the topper in my college, I was the topper in the entire history of my college. So in one sense, all my dreams were fulfilled at that time. But to my great surprise and dismay, I found that this dream achievement did not bring any fulfillment. No doubt I was elated, exhilarated, ecstatic when initially the results came out and friends congratulated me, and my family members were also proud of me. But just in a matter of few days, I realized that actually there is no inherent happiness in just holding the mark sheet in front of oneself. Actually, it is when others congratulate a person, felicitate a person, that one feels happiness. And then I found that some of my friends did not congratulate me. And I found my thoughts becoming very dark. Why is this person not congratulating me? Does he not know? Or is he envious? What is it? And I didn't like the direction of my thoughts. And then it struck me that actually this whole achievement for which I had been dreaming my whole life had actually not made me happy. It had actually made me more dependent on others for my happiness. So only when others congratulated me would I become happy. And then afterwards, a few months later, some other student from some other college gave the GRE, and he got 10 marks more than me, 2360. And what I had thought I had set a record, the record was just cut off. So record was broken, and I just felt adrift, lost. I was wondering what is the use of working so hard, slaving so much, dreaming lifelong to achieve something which doesn't bring intrinsic fulfillment and achievement, and can be taken away at any moment by factors beyond our control. So that's one thing which made me search. There must be some other source of happiness that will be giving inner fulfillment independent of external felicitation and appreciation. What was that? I started searching for that. In parallel, I had also thought of intellectual achievement, not just in terms of becoming number one, but also in terms of a way for higher character build up and a deeper development of one's thinking and improvement of one's living. So at that time, I had been thinking of pursuing astrophysics because I had interest in space research. So I met just after my GRE exam. One of my college friends arranged for my meeting with a researcher in IUCA. IUCA is the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics. It's a major research body based in Pune. And there was this researcher who had a double doctorate degree from America. And when I went to meet him, I was out. I went to his room, and he was staying there with his wife. His wife was also a PhD. She was also a researcher, and both of them were brilliant. And I was very inspired to meet them. At the same time, I found that this person was a chain smoker. That disturbed me a little bit, because I was thinking that if a person is involved in a field as exciting as astrophysics, then the excitement and the fulfillment from that research would make self-destructive habits like smoking unnecessary. And then after that, as I was talking with him, I couldn't, although I didn't want to stare at the cigarette, but I couldn't avoid it. I was quite taken aback by that. And then his wife just smiled at me, and she said, I tell him don't smoke so much, but he just can't stop. And she said this quite frivolously. And then she took out from her own purse a cigarette, and she's also started smoking. So that gave me a bit of a shock. And afterwards I started reflecting at what I had seen. I had seen even in my college days that students who were academically excellent performers also still had self-defeating habits. Then I also heard about a senior student who had been a university topper throughout his 8 semesters in engineering and had got a high-paying job in a leading MNC. And then within just the first year of his job, he because he had been a chain smoker for a long time, he got lung cancer and he died. So at that time I started thinking, this education which we are getting, that doesn't really lead to character formation. The education can and does help in gaining employment and in technological development, but it doesn't lead to character development. So what kind of education will lead to character development? And then along with this, I'd always been thinking of trying to contribute to society in some way. So I was involved with a social welfare organization in my college days, and they had various wings. So the wing which I chose to be a part of was education. So one of their themes was that education is the key to a better India. If people are educated, then they can get better jobs. When they get better jobs, they won't have to suffer under poverty, and then they won't succumb to criminality. And that way we can build a better India. So just near our college, there were some slums, and I would go to those slums, and the school children over there, I would sort of take unpaid honorary tuitions for them, wherein I would try to supplement whatever teaching they were getting in the government schools. The teaching in the government school was not too good. So when I was doing this teaching, I started talking with these children, and I came to know after a few visits that most of these children lived in mortal fear of their father. Most of the fathers were alcoholics, and when they would get high on alcohol and come back to their home, then they would let their hands loose on their family, on their wife and their children. So they would squander their money, and then afterward they would abuse their family members also. And they were in bad financial straits. And further, these children were living in a state of great fear. Now, when I talk with these fathers also, because sometimes they would be there when I would go to the slum area for teaching, so I found that these people were these alcoholics were not bad people. They were decent human beings. They were in their own way courteous, and they would thank me for having come there to teach their children. But then the children told me that actually once they drank alcohol, they would become different persons. It was as if some sort of evil ghost would enter into them, and they would become unrecognizable, unconscionable, insensitive, monstrously insensitive. So while I was going for this education, for educating these children, I couldn't but think that, when their lives were in such turbulence, and they were living in fear, how would my teaching them a little bit about history or geography or maths, how was it going to contribute in a substantial way to improving anything in their life? And at this time, one of my friends was involved much more in social service. I was going to a nearby slum, but he was going to a distant village, and he had been going for quite a long time, and he had not only inspired the children over there to study diligently, he had even talked with the parents, and he had got the fathers, and he had got some of them to give up alcohol. And that was considered a great triumph, not only for him but for the whole social welfare organization. But later, when one day he came back from the village, and he had a devastated look on his face, and he told that the previous week there had been elections, and prior to the elections the candidate had brought in truckloads of alcohol and distributed it free to all the people who would agree to vote for him. And all these fathers who had said that they would stop drinking alcohol, they had just drunk themselves high. And what literally broke the heart of my friend was that not only the fathers, but even their sons, the students whom he was teaching, they also drank alcohol. And this really devastated him. And it got me also thinking, how can I effectively contribute to society? If a double PhD education had not helped a person to become free from smoking, then just some primary, secondary, graduate education, would it help people to protect themselves from alcoholism? Very unlikely. So I started thinking, what would be a way by which education would lead to character build-up, and education would lead to transformation of people. It was at this time, with this background, with all these thoughts going on, that I was introduced to Krishna consciousness. One of my friends gave me a Bhagavad Gita, and at that time I asked him. He had been much more materialistic than I was. I was a little bit more intellectually oriented, and I asked him, what happened to you? Because he was looking so peaceful and joyful, and he was looking so transformed. I would never have thought that he would become a religious kind of person, and yet he had become. So I asked him, what happened? And in Marathi, I was a Maharashtrian, so I had asked him, Tula kai zhala? What happened to you? And he told me that he got a Bhagavad Gita, he read the Gita, and he found that provided the best guidance for living. And he is now living according to the Bhagavad Gita, and he gave me a Bhagavad Gita also. Now, I had read Bhagavad Gita earlier, but I had not found it much relevant to my life. But he gave me Bhagavad Gita as it is, and he insisted that I read it. I want to tell him that I already read the Gita, but seeing his enthusiasm, I decided that I will read it and see what it contains. And as I started reading it, the first thing that struck me was that you're not the body or the soul. Although this had been mentioned in various of the spiritual literature that I had read earlier, it was nowhere so emphatically and consistently stated as it was in Bhagavad Gita as it is. And then it talked about mantra meditation. It talked about how one needs to purify oneself, and the holy name of God can purify oneself. So as I started studying the Bhagavad Gita, memorizing its verses, and I started seeing that, especially I found the Bhagavad Gita's understanding of the purpose of life and guidance about how to live as very intellectually coherent. The idea that God loves us and we are meant to love Him, and in loving Him there is real happiness, and all the perverted drives for pleasure that we find in the world, they are all misdirections of our original love for Krishna. So the more we learn to love Krishna, the less we will be attracted to these things. And so this was like the theoretical part, the theory of what is life. I had a scientific bent of mind, so I found the Bhagavad Gita's explanation quite scientific. Then the experiment part was mantra meditation and practicing devotional service. So as I started chanting Hare Krishna, I found remarkable transformations in my life. I found that I always had a short temper, so I found my temper going down considerably, and other negative traits started going off. And not only in me, I was staying in a hostel, so I invited the local devotees to come and conduct a program in the hostel, and it became a weekly program. And many of my college friends, hostel friends, they also adopted the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, and their lives became transformed. And they were able to break free from all bad habits, and they became better students, better human beings. And I could clearly see that this knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita and its application in terms of Bhakti Yoga was making them into better human beings. And I felt inspired to start sharing the Bhagavad Gita's wisdom myself. And as I started doing that, I found that just understanding the Gita and speaking on the Gita and sharing its wisdom gave me a far greater fulfillment than what the thrill, the exhilaration that I had got on my GRE record-breaking performance. And here, this fulfillment did not depend on somebody congratulating me. It simply depended on my own trying to serve, just remember and share Krishna's message. That was something which I could always do, irrespective of who was there or not there. And after that, I also found that this was a way in which I could help in contributing to social transformation. As I met the Gita teachers, many of them were brahmacharis, some of them were grahasthas, and I found that all of them were living pure principled lives, free from bad habits and negative tendencies, and they were learned and yet so humble and gentle. So I found them to be in many ways exemplary human beings, and that inspired me. So the first point of seeking individual full achievement and fulfillment, I found that in studying and sharing the Gita. And education as a means for character build-up, I found in those who had studied and were living the Gita, that though they were learned, many of them were more learned than me. Some of them were IITians, some of them were American graduates, postgraduates and doctorates who had come back to India and had embraced monkhood. And they were having, because of their spiritual knowledge, they were having such exemplary character. And thirdly, through my social service, through offering a supplement to school education, the positive contribution that I was not able to do, I was able to do here by offering to contribute in sharing Gita wisdom. And that inspired me to not only start sharing this wisdom vigorously, but eventually to dedicate my life to sharing Gita wisdom. And that is how I was introduced in 1996 end. In 1996, in October, I got the GRE result. In November, just a few days later, I was introduced to Bhagavad Gita as it is through my friend. And then within a couple of years after I completed my graduation and worked briefly in a company, then I decided to become a brahmachari so that I could share Gita wisdom with as many people as possible through speaking and writing. Thank you. Hare Krishna.